Hello everybody, it's Sarah, and today I want to talk to you about the books that I read in January of 2022. And you might have noticed that I didn't have a mid-month wrap-up, contrary to most months last year, and that is because I actually didn't read enough to warrant a mid-month wrap-up, which actually makes me really happy. Because, as I have mentioned multiple times already, I felt like I read too much in 2021. So having only read 5.5 books in January is actually something that's a cause for celebration for me. So yes, in today's video I will go through the 5.5 books. I'll explain the and a half books a bit later, but I will go through all the books that I read in January and I will tell you my thoughts on them. I had one nonfiction, which was the and a half book. I had 2 rereads and I had 3 books that were new to me, 2 of which I really enjoyed, 2 loved a lot, and then 1 of which I really didn't like. So yeah, I will get into my thoughts and the way I will structure my wrap-ups this year. I'll just mention it because it's the first wrap-up of the year. I started rating books, star rating books once again this year. So every wrap-up I will start with the nonfiction book that I read or started that month, and then I will go into my rereads, starting from the reread I enjoyed the least, going to the reread I enjoyed the most. And then I will talk about the books that were new to me, again starting with the books that I gave the least stars and that I enjoyed the least, and ending with the book that I loved the most that month. And yes, that is it for this intro, so let's get started with the nonfiction, which of course for January was Thomas Piketty's The Capital in the 21st Century. This is quite a chunky book. Thomas Piketty is, I believe, I don't know what you'd call it in English, but I believe he's an economic historian, meaning he looks at the development of economics and of different economic dynamics throughout history. And in this book, he looks at the development of capital, mostly in Europe and America, because that's where he found the most sources. Also, looking at a worldwide development of capital would probably be too much for one book, but he does also include some sources from, I think, specifically Japan, I remember, maybe China. I'm not really sure about African or South American countries. So far, to be honest, most of what I've read has been focusing on Europe and then also North America. And yes, I am so far about halfway through the book. I don't know where exactly I am in the physical copy because I'm listening to this on audio, and the audio is split into 4 parts of each like 7 to 8 hours. I'm done with 2 parts so far. I have 2 left, which I will probably continue in March because I have other nonfiction I am reading in February. And yes, so far I am really enjoying it. I think this is a book that sometimes can be a bit dry because, you know, there's not a lot of exciting things about it, let's put it like that. But at the same time, I think this is a book that might be intimidating, but that is really easy to understand. And the way Thomas Piketty explains everything and explains the basis of economics and of what capital is and so on, and what types of capital there are, just makes it really easy to follow along. And also I just love that every now and again there's just passages where this book so far has mostly consisted of dry facts, as in this was what capital was at this time. And looking at the development, I'm just like, how can anyone still think capitalism is something good? But yeah, anyway, there's also some very snarky comments about colonialism, for example, because of course the development of capital in Europe has a lot to do with colonialism as well. And then there's also a lot of discussion about slavery in North America, because again, the development of capital in North America has a lot to do with slavery. And so yeah, anyway, very much enjoying it. I'm probably boring you to death by now, so let's continue on with the fiction books that I read in January. first my rereads, and the first of those I have is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Farseer trilogy, which is the first trilogy within her Realms of the Elderlings world series of series. And in this trilogy we follow Fitzchivalry Farseer, who is the son of, well, not the son, he's the bastard of the king in waiting of the Six Duchies, which is our main setting within this trilogy. And so after Fitz is discovered, his father abdicates his place as king in waiting, and Fitz is taken in by the king, by the castle, by the people, servants of the castle, by the stable master, and he is trained as an assassin and to become the king's assassin. So if this reread is any indication of how I'm going to be doing on my reread of Robin Hobb's Realms of the Elderlings, and then continuing on with the books that I haven't read in that series of series yet, which, by the way, that is the reason why I reread this. I think I forgot to mention I am planning, or I am currently rereading all of her books that I have already read because I want to finally finish the series. I am also buddy reading all the books with a bunch of friends, and so yes, but if this reread is any indication of how I'm going to be doing with future books, then things ain't looking good for me, because it took me 20 days to get through this, and this is the shortest of Robin Hobb's Realms of the Elderlings books. But yeah, the reason why it took me so long to get through this is because I was just, to be honest, really bored most of the time. And the reason for that is that Robin Hobb has one major flaw in her books. Like, her writing is beautiful, but the thing is, if you don't like Fitz, or if you don't care about Fitz, her books that follow Fitz tend to become very boring, because they are written in first person and they follow exclusively Fitz as a POV. And I personally do not care about Fitz. And especially this first book just reads a lot like a very, very long prologue. I also think, I know that a lot of people fall in love with Fitz, but personally I just think like I don't know why, but even though this is first person perspective, I just feel very distant to him, and I feel like I can't properly build not a relationship with him, what's it called? A connection to him. Obviously not a relationship. And I can't properly get a feel for his character because the way he tells his story is very dry a lot of times. And I know this series makes a lot of people emotional, but for the life of me, I cannot see why, and I cannot see how, because I'm just not interested in Fitz. And so yeah, took me very long to get through this. I don't dislike this book. I still would give it the same stars that I gave it the first time I read it, ish. I probably would only give this 3 stars now instead of 3.5 stars, which I gave it on the first read. But yeah, it's the first book. There's not a lot happening. We're mostly introduced to Fitz as a character. There's some other characters introduced. A lot of the characters that I enjoy more don't appear that much yet in this book, so, you know, the little that I get from other characters isn't there yet, and so that's why I didn't particularly enjoy this book. My second reread in January was one that was far more pleasurable for me, and that was The Ruin of Kings by Jen Lyons. I reread this because I am currently hosting a read-along to prepare for the release of the 5th and final book. And if you're interested in joining the read-along, it's on the Discord of my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries. The Discord link is left down below, so definitely go and check it out. If you still want to join us, it doesn't matter that we read The Ruin of Kings in January, you can still jump in. It's no problem whatsoever. And yeah, I decided to tab this book, and as you can probably tell by the amount of tabs, I very, very much enjoyed my reread of this. First, before we get into my thoughts, I always forget to talk about what the books that I'm talking about are actually about. And in The Ruin of Kings, we follow our main character, Kieran, and we are introduced to him at the very beginning of the book when he is in quite the predicament. He is imprisoned, and his jailer tells him that she wants him to tell her his life story and how he ended up in the position that he's in right now. And if he doesn't do that, she's gonna kill and eat his family. So, you know, great start to a book. And so Kieran starts telling his story. However, he doesn't start at the very beginning, at least not according to his chela. And so Kieran and his chela take turns telling Kieran's life story. There's a reason in world why Kieran's chela can tell Kieran's life story, but yes, that is basically what this first book is about, and it's just a lot of fun. I love this. I love how unique the writing style is. I love the choices that the author made in terms of writing style. There are some negative points, mainly that it is very confusing on a first read. You don't really know what's going on, and so that's why I loved my reread way more than I loved my first read of the book. My first read probably would have been between 3 and 3.5 stars if I had rated books last year. Now it is a solid 4 stars for me. But yeah, just be aware of that going into it, although I do not want to discourage you because it's so much fun. And as you can see, I tapped a lot of stuff. Orange was for the times when Kieran was stupid, which I don't think was the most. Then blue was for the time Kieran was gay, which might have been the most. No, actually Kieran was stupid more often than he was gay, which, you know, stupid and gay, that's the way to describe Kieran. And then I had red or pink and yellow ones. Yellow ones were for the familial connections, like whenever something was explained about who is someone else's relative, I tapped yellow because that's complicated. Family relationships in this series are very complicated, mostly due to, well, that's spoilers. And then pink was background info in terms of world building, in terms of how we got where we are right now in the bigger picture of the world, not in terms of Kieran's story. So yes, I just enjoyed this very much. I also enjoyed the read along a lot. We had a lot of fun, and so definitely come and join us. So next, let me talk about the books that I read for the first time this year, and let's start with the book that I enjoyed the least, and that was Camelot Rising, no, The Excalibur Curse, the third and final book in the Camelot Rising series by Kirsten White. I think I gave the first one 4 stars. I gave the second one 3 stars, a solid 3 stars. I didn't enjoy it overly much anymore, but that was also partially due because I had mostly said goodbye to YA at that point. So yeah, didn't enjoy the second one as much as I did the first one. However, this third one takes the cake. I gave it 2 to 2.5 stars max. It's so bad, and just to warn you, I will go mostly full spoilers on this. Because yeah, so if you don't want any spoilers after I introduced you to what this book actually is about, just skip ahead until you don't see me holding this up anymore. But yeah, what this is about is it's a YA Arthurian retelling. We follow Guinevere, who is sent by Merlin to Arthur to help him protect Camelot. However, there's some mystery in Guinevere's past. She might not be who she actually seems to be. She might not actually even be Guinevere. And so on the one hand, we follow her as she tries to help Arthur protect Camelot, and on the other hand, we follow her as she tries to unravel the mystery around her identity. So, as I said, I enjoyed the first book. I thought it was quite well written. I thought it was engaging. Then the second book was like, yeah, it's a solid 3 stars. It's enjoyable. It's quite forgettable. And now the third book is horrible. And the main reason for that is, to be honest, the romance. Because, well, that went south very quickly. Also, apparently, because I talked to a friend about this series, and when I recounted like some plot points and when I recounted what this series is about, they said that it's like apparently very closely resembles Merlin, like the TV show, which I guess isn't surprising because both are Arthurian retellings or reimaginations. But yeah, they said that a lot of things seem almost too close for comfort. And so yeah, why didn't I like this? The romance. First of all, there's a love triangle slash quartet, as in Guinevere has 3 love interests. The first is obviously Arthur. Arthur is pretty boring. I'm going into full spoilers now, by the way. So Arthur is pretty boring. He's decent enough. There's some character assassination done to him in book 3, because in the first 2 books, yeah, he has wrong ideas sometimes, but generally speaking, he's a very decent person. In the 3rd book, that just goes out the window. Maybe I forgot some things from book 2, but pretty much goes out the window. He does not seem to respect Guinevere anymore, so yeah, it's just really weird. The second love interest is the love interest that I was rooting for, and I looked through the comments on Goodreads on this book, and that was the love interest that a lot of people were rooting for, actually. So it wasn't just me. And that is Mordred. Mordred is, first of all, like Patroclus for me, in that if he appears in any iteration of the Arthurian retelling and he's not completely butchered and is halfway decently characterized, then I will love him. He will be my favorite character. Mordred is my precious bean. It is what it is. And that's, however, not the only reason why I rooted for Guinevere and Mordred. I genuinely thought the 2 of them had the best chemistry. He also falls into the kind of bad boy type character, although not the rude asshole bad boy type character, but the one who's like dark and brooding and kind of mysterious, but has a really good heart. And you know, he helps people with magic, because magic is outlawed in Camelot. And yeah, he's just a really decent person. And there's also a lot of parallels between Guinevere and her character development and Mordred, because both of them are people who have primarily been seen as tools for those around them to reach what they want to reach. And so while Guinevere does have friends, or has gained friends in Camelot, Mordred hasn't, and Mordred really only has Guinevere. And so, you know, there's some parallels between the 2 of them. And also the 2 of them fuck in this book. You know, they kiss and fuck in this book. Obviously not on page because it's YA, but it's made very clear that they had sex now. So yeah. And then the 3rd character, or the 3rd love interest, is Lancelot. Lancelot in this iteration is a woman, which was what made me in the 1st book think that Lancelot would surely be the main love interest, because why else would you make Lancelot a woman if not to make the whole thing sapphic? And so that was what a lot of people actually thought, and I thought the chemistry between Guinevere and Lancelot was decent in the 1st book. But then the 2nd book came around, and suddenly there was no chemistry whatsoever anymore, which wasn't just my part. I saw a lot of reviewers that I saw talking about the 2nd book talk about that, how they're really confused because apparently it's not sapphic after all. And yeah, I guess actually it is sapphic, because in this 3rd book, suddenly Guinevere and Lancelot end up together, which does not make sense because they do not spend most of this book on page together. They have no chemistry whatsoever. They have not kissed by the end of the book. They hold hands. And there's this whole line of Guinevere where she's like, oh, I found passion with Mordred and I found duty with Arthur, and now I will find love with Lancelot. I'm like, but you forgot a thing though, because by the end of this book, Guinevere is still married to Arthur. And I don't remember whether or not they had a conversation in the 2nd book, Arthur and Guinevere, where they just talked about, you know, yeah, we have a relationship that is dedicated to saving Camelot or to protecting Camelot, but we don't really want to be in a romantic relationship anymore. I don't remember that. I don't think so though, because by the beginning of the 1st book, well, not 1st book, 3rd book, Guinevere was still all, woe is me, Arthur won't fuck me. Not as crude, because again, it's a YA book, but so like, she's still married to Arthur by the end of this book, but apparently she's also gonna pursue a relationship with Lancelot. And excuse me, isn't that usually where Arthurian retellings start, not where they end? Like, are you just ending this YA trilogy by saying, yeah, Guinevere is gonna cheat on Arthur with Lancelot in a bit? So, even if there was any chemistry between the two of them. I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? This book was so bad. It was so bad, and I did not care anymore whatsoever. Also, literally, Guinevere had better chemistry with a random woman that appeared in this book for the first time than she ever had with Lancelot. So yeah, anyway, didn't like it. And this wrap-up is getting very long. I am sorry. I have a lot of things to say about the books. So next I have Jade War by Fonda Lee, which is the second book in the Greenbone saga, and I gave this one 4 stars. This series is an adult high fantasy series set in a world where jade can be used to do stuff. Basically, jade can be used to enhance your physical and mental powers. Very roughly explained. And this is also a series that, unlike a lot of high fantasy series, has more of an urban setting. We're set in a city that is inspired by, I think, late 20th century Shanghai mostly. And we follow people from basically a mafia clan as they are trying to keep power within their city, but also within their world, because there's obviously other political players in this world as well. One that is very reminiscent of America, North America, the US. And yeah, every time they appear on screen, I'm just like, I hate you so much. I literally hate you so much. But yes, this was the buddy read for my book club, the same book club where we're also buddy reading A Chorus of Dragons. And that book club is called Of Queens, Witches and Valkyries. I think I mentioned it already. And it's all about reading adult high fantasy written by women or genderqueer folks. And just as with the Discord, the Twitter link will also be left down below. So if you're interested in joining us, definitely do. And so yes, this was the buddy read for the book club for January, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this series a lot. It is incredibly unique. I have never read any fantasy that is quite like this. It is also incredibly stressful to read this. Like, so incredibly stressful, I cannot tell you, because every single time any character makes any decision, I am convinced it was the wrong decision, and I am convinced that they're not gonna die. And sometimes that happens, sometimes that doesn't happen, but it makes the reading experience very stressful, and made me very happy that the third book didn't win the poll for February buddy read, because I certainly want to take a break in February from this series. But it's incredibly well written. I love the characters. I love the world building. I love the politics in this, but also the economics. This is a very intensely economic fantasy as well, which is an aspect of, you know, world building that often gets ignored because a lot of people think it's very boring. And me saying that there's a lot of economic factors in this, please don't see that as there's a lot of dull economics talk in this series. It's just that economics influence the decisions that some characters make, which, you know, I just really loved. I also love the more modern, you know, influences in the setting, because you have guns, you have computers, you have phones, you have everything, and that's also something that you don't often see in high fantasy. And so yeah, I can definitely highly recommend this series. I'm gonna stop talking now though, because I will have a full review once I have finished the trilogy and once I read the last book. Moving on to the last book that I have for this wrap up, I have The Lies Not by M.A. Carrick, which is the second book in the Rook and Rose series and the sequel to The Mask of Mirrors. This was the first book that I read this year, and I started the year out on a bang with a 5 out of 5 stars book. Now, first, let me talk about what this series is about. This series, in the first book, our main character, or one of our main characters, our main character is Ren, who is a con artist. And she is returning to the city where she grew up in. She grew up in the streets of the city, and so now she has the goal to pull off her biggest con yet, and to con her way into one of the noble families of the city, so she never has to lead a life on the streets again. And so that is the main storyline of the first book, the main setup of the first book, let's put it like that. And aside from that, we also have a masked vigilante, we have a morally dubious crime boss, we have intrigues, we have nobles, we have conflict, we have magic, we have mystery. There's just so many elements. And the reason why I loved the second book, which, to be honest, I already gave the first book 5 out of 5 stars, I love the second book even more. And if that is any indication of the third book, then you know, this I haven't, like, I'm gonna trust myself to say that this has the potential of becoming one of my top 3 favorite series of all time, like legitimately. But the reason why I love this so much is because it took what we had from the first book in terms of characters, in terms of world building, and it expanded on it brilliantly. In the first book, we're mostly introduced to the characters, we're introduced to, you know, their characteristics, we're introduced to some of their motivations, especially for those characters who are more main characters. But in the second book, first of all, the character development from the first to the second book is amazing. It makes sense in terms of what happened in the first book, but also we are introduced to the motivations of some of the main side characters or some of the other main characters, and some of the characters that used to be more of a mystery in the first book, which I really enjoyed. We really expanded. Well, the first book mostly, you know, focused on the characters on their own. In the second book, we really focus a lot on the relationships between the characters, which, by the way, the relationships are so well done. Both the romantic as well as the platonic friendship relationships. I love them so much. Then the world building is also expanded on. We have 2 main ethnic groups within the city, and while I felt like the first book mostly focused on one of those ethnic groups, while we still got some from the other, this second book really focused on the one that we didn't get as much of in the first book. So I really enjoyed that as well. And then we also got a lot more world building in terms of the magic. In the first book, I felt like a lot of the magic was, you know, not whimsical, but it wasn't thoroughly explained, and the backgrounds to the magic wasn't thoroughly explained, and we got a lot more of the backgrounds of the magic, of some of the magic systems, which, by the way, there's also 2 magic systems in this series, which are then again connected to the different ethnic groups, which I love in terms of world building. But yeah, the magic was expanded on in this book as well. And there's just, oh my god, this series also now has probably my currently not favorite ship, actually. Kieran and Tereth are my favorite ship, but one of my favorite ships currently, and I just love the 2 of them so much, and they're so cute, and oh my god, I love them. So yes, I sadly cannot tell you anything more. It also had one of the cutest romantic scenes ever. Like, oh my god, the interactions between 2 of the characters had me literally flailing in bed and just, you know, squealing because it was so cute. But yeah, I can't tell you that much more because this is a second book, and so obviously spoiler territory and whatever, but I just love this book so much. Seriously, it was so good. But yeah, that was it for this very long, probably January wrap-up. I will try to keep my wrap-ups in the future shorter, I promise. But anyway, if you have any thoughts on any of the books that I mentioned in this video, leave them in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media as well as to the book club that I mentioned are in the description box down below, so go and check those out as well, and I hope I'll see you very soon. Bye!